This is To Help You Heal, and I'm your host, Marie Monville. We are going to spend 10 minutes talking about healing. What kind of healing do you need? Is it in your mindset? Is it emotional healing? Is it spiritual healing? You know, there's a lot of healing that we all need, and this is where you're going to find it every week, 10 minutes on Tuesday. I'm so glad you're spending this time with me. We are back this week for week 3 of Stories That Shaped Me. I hope that you have been enjoying this series, that you've really been getting a lot out of it. I know that I've been receiving a lot of messages from listeners saying how much that it's really connecting with them. And so I hope that this week is going to be another one of those weeks where you walk away feeling like this was just for you, that God had this episode in mind before you ever knew that you needed it. And this week, I want to talk about that place that we get in sometimes when we're kind of waiting for the next bad thing to happen or just assuming that it's going to be the worst case scenario. I don't know about you, but there are moments in my life where I really lean into that whole aspect of I'm not just going to stick my toes in the water. I'm going to jump off the diving board into the deep end, and not the deep end in a good way. When I look back at the various journeys of my life, especially through places of loss and grief, I see the Amish schoolhouse shooting, and God did something so incredible in that season. And He was so real and tangible and present. And I was really locked into Him. And I knew that He was doing big things. I had asked Him that very first day, God, do more than I could ask or think or imagine. Like, do something big with this right now. And I had no idea what He was going to do, but I walked that out in faith. But I have to admit that not every journey of my life have I met it like that. And I think for, someone of faith, for us as we walk through our seasons of relationship with God, where it sometimes looks different than it did in a previous season, that's disappointing for me, disappointing in myself, not disappointing in God, that I can walk through some seasons and find my faith so strong, and believing that God is going to help me, and that He is going to do something good with something that doesn't feel good or look good. And yet there are seasons where I have struggled with that. And the loss of my dad is definitely one of those. I think for me, as I look at that season and I think about the part of the story that shaped me, it was kind of this place of, I see now, years later, kind of looking back, I'm able to see that in that season, I really stopped looking for the good. And I got in this kind of rut with the Lord where I would tell Him every morning, God, don't ask me to dream with you, because dreams just lead to disappointment. They lead to discouragement for me. You tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it, but I'm not going to dream about it. And He let me go like that for quite a while. And then one morning, I just really felt the Lord challenge me that the problem wasn't the fact that I was, ended up being disappointed. The problem was why I got there. And it was because when God spoke these dreams to my heart, when He spoke these things to me, I immediately envisioned the end result. I immediately jumped to the ending, figured out exactly how everything was supposed to go, knew how I wanted it to look, 2 seconds later. And the thing is, life doesn't usually go like that. And the ending is generally never what we imagined, but it's because of the middle. The middle is such an important part. It's where we learn more about ourselves, it's where we discover more about God. The middle has such value. And when I jump straight to the ending, it's as if I'm removing all of the rest of that story. I'm taking it all out of context. And as the Lord really unpacked that for me, it made sense to me. I thought, yes, I see why I get disappointed, because I immediately think that the ending is going to be the one that I envisioned, not necessarily the story that you're writing, God. And so, would you help me to stop jumping into this place where I think I already know the ending when you ever say one word? And I write about this pretty extensively in my book, To Help You Heal. This place of discouragement and disappointment where it's kind of like a foggy morning. You can be outside or maybe driving your car on a foggy morning, and it just kind of encases you, and you don't see the end of it. It's just kind of there. It's like a blanket that covers you, and not in a good way. And I'm sure that we've all have had these places in our lives where, discouragement and disappointment, it's kind of covered us like a blanket. And maybe sometimes we feel like it's God's fault or He didn't come through or whatever. And I don't think that He's offended by the broken way that we view Him or that we view His work in our lives, I think he understands. I think Jesus gets it, having been a human and walked the earth. But I think he's still, even in those places, his heart is burdened for us because he wants us to experience more than that. He wants us to know more than that. And so when I think about that part of the story that shaped me, it wasn't just the loss of my dad, it was then the realization that I kind of stopped dreaming. And that it's not that dreaming isn't a safe thing to do, but it's dreaming without the expectation of a predetermined ending. Saying, "God, I will go with you on this journey wherever you take me." And so, when I think about the time frame of when all this happened, so just to give you some context, October 2nd, 2006, Amish schoolhouse shooting. My dad was diagnosed in 2012, passed away on Christmas Eve morning. I would say I probably got stuck in that place of the discouragement and disappointment for at least 6 solid months. Then kind of stepping my way out of that, but it's a tricky thing. It's like once you go there, your brain just wants to keep going there because we wear these ruts in our brain. If you live in an area of the country where you have ruts in the road, you know what those are like. You start driving your car and it sucks your whole car that direction as you get into that rut. And our brain is like that too. We get these ruts in our brain and we can create new pathways. It's this concept called neuroplasticity. We can create these new patterns in our brain, but we have to be really intentional about it. And so I think, if you're resonating with this aspect of saying, hey, there have been times in my life where, I am all in and I'm going after it with God. And even though I'm walking through something difficult, I have faith and I'm trusting and I'm believing. But then there's these other times where, I kind of forget and I have this predetermined expectation that leads me down this path of disappointment and I have trouble staying out of that rut. I think it's because, we're almost wired, especially conditionally from our culture, to expect bad news, to expect the worst case scenario. But God is not a worst case scenario God. He is a good God who does incredible things in the stories of our lives. And sometimes that doesn't happen through circumstance, but it happens through the way that He speaks to us, through the healing that He brings to us, and through the truths that we get to discover about Him. So, I just want to encourage you that as you're walking out your faith journey, if you find yourself in these places where you're saying, wow, I felt so confident and full of faith in these other seasons, but I'm really struggling with it here. Don't get all panicked about what is wrong with me and how did I get in this place. Just be able to say to yourself, okay, I've got a rut in my brain and I need to create a new pathway. And so we're going to go down this new pathway and we're just going to keep going down that pathway until that becomes the thing that I do, until that becomes the thing that's automatic for me. Because I believe that God has healing and He wants to help us do that. He wants to help us create that new pathway, but it's up to us to be intentional about it. So maybe you need to put a sign on your laptop or on your desk or on your refrigerator, in your bathroom, on the mirror, just reminding yourself, new pathway. We're going after a new pathway that we can choose to have hope and faith and trust, to believe that God is working in our lives, even in the things that we don't love or the things that we can't see our way through yet. We can choose to believe that He's a good God and that He's working it out for our good and for His glory. Because that's the thing, as we each share the stories that have shaped us, we bring glory to Him. We help somebody else to have a different perspective of who God is and the way that He's working in their lives. We have this opportunity to make these connections through this place of vulnerability and trust. And so I want to encourage you. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You just need a new pathway if that is you. And I know for myself there are moments and things that I've walked through even in the years since that revelation of, hey, I need to not jump to the end conclusion. I need to not have these predetermined expectations. I need to go with God on the journey and allow Him to unfold it in the way that He does. I know all that stuff. It doesn't mean that I always choose that path, but I'm able to catch myself. And I know that if I'm in a place that feels more like fear and anxiety and worry and less like faith and trust in God, I need to be really intentional about what I'm putting in my brain. And so that generally means I need to spend more time in the Word, more time in prayer, more time in worship. I need to praise God for the things that He's doing that I cannot see yet, for the ways that He is at work that I haven't had any idea of yet, and for the way that He's already come through in this situation. And I am telling you, when I start praying like that, when I start leaning into worship like that, that is when the shift happens. That's when I'm reminded of all the spaces in my life where He's come through for me, that He is a God who comes through, that He's on time. And so, if this has stirred something in you, I just want to encourage you that I'm always here to talk. I would love to help you walk this path to find this place of really leaning into God, of trusting Him, of cultivating that relationship. You can sign up for a clarity session with me. You can book a free clarity call. But more than that, I'd love to invite you to do some work. Because if we want to have some change, we have to work it out. We have to, do the work to make that happen. I have 2 spaces for one-on-one coaching yet this month, 2 new client opportunities, and I'd love for you to be one of those. So pop on over to my website, check it out if you'd like, and if you have any questions about it, feel free to email me. But book that clarity call. Let's start helping you walk through this, and then let's turn that into real momentum with a month or 2 of sessions. I'm telling you, it will be so worth the return on investment because I know the way that I've seen God do incredible things in my life, and I know that He wants to do those for you too. So I hope that this episode has been encouraging to you, and I can't wait for you to come back next week as we wrap up this series, Stories That Shaped Me.